Is ready.
Health issues is a whole
Call to order the meeting for the fiscal year 2024-2025 capital budget presentation. Roll call, please.
Balmas.
Present.
Thorstensen.
Here.
Woodside. Ross. Here. Garner.
Here.
O'Brien.
Present.
5 present.
All present. Pat?
Sure. So we typically do this the end of December, first meeting in January. So staff's been working on the budget now for a couple months. We kick off in front of the village board with the proposed capital plan for the upcoming year. So it'll look familiar from what you've seen in the past. Going to do it a little different tonight. So kind of pass the mic, hear from the departments what they have proposed in the capital budget for each of their area. And then at the end, go over how the proposed capital plan in fact affects some fund balances on the general fund, water and sewer fund, et cetera. So again, just the first step. Obviously, you know, this is a months-long process, so any input the village board has, we're still to a point that we can make adjustments along the way. The next milestone will be in March when we present the operating budgets, and then budget hearing in April, and then the fiscal year starts May 1. So you see something that you think is missing, again, doesn't have to be feedback tonight. If you want to get hold of Brian or myself as you look through it, make sure you do that. So with that, I'll kick it to Brian to get going.
All right, thank you, Pat. As Pat mentioned, we're in the kind of the long-term planning phase of the budget preparation cycle here. Includes 2 items: multi-year capital plan, helps us identify a strategy for capital and infrastructure. Also gives us a scope of what we're responsible for and lays out what our priorities are for the next fiscal year, the budget that we're preparing for. Also, multi-year financial forecast. This tells us what the impact of those capital needs are on fund balances. It tells us whether we can sustain operations. And then we also take a deep dive into major revenues. We do 3 scenarios: baseline, contraction, expansion, and then some revenues too. So we'll hit on that a little bit. Capital plan first, fiscal year 25 through 29, 5-year capital plan totals $62 million, largely funded as pay-as-you-go. We don't have any debt contemplated in the plan. The main sources of revenue or funding for the plan is the home rule sales tax, the half of the home rule sales tax, motor fuel tax, contributions from the general fund. So this would be funds in the general fund above the fund balance policy. Using that, water and sewer rates, obviously on the water and sewer side, some police restricted revenue funds to a smaller extent, some grants, and then flexible financing, which we don't have any in this plan, but we have used in the past for Fire Station 3. Looking specifically at next year, right now, $15.7 million. Transportation system makes up about 40% of that, just over 40% at $6.4 million. That includes road resurfacing only this year. I don't think there's any reconstruction in the plan this year. Water and sewer system, 3.2% or just over 20. 3.2 million or just over 20%. Includes the underground work, building and improvements, $2.5 million, 16.3%. That includes not only routine maintenance, but other replacement items like Village Hall HVAC, which Pat will touch on. Vehicles and equipment, 2.3 million or just under 15% of the total. Obviously, we have maintenance targets for fleet maintenance, and they know when vehicles will be refreshed, specifically in police. Chief Kavanaugh has a plan on his stuff, also matching with what we need for personnel changes. Technology, just under $1 million, 5.8%. Really here, cyber threats, workforce needs. Ryan will talk about all the rest of that fun stuff. Stormwater management, $325,000, 2.1%. And then some things we're still dealing with: supply chain, lead times, vehicles specifically. We're doing our best to match the expenses in the budget and get things on order in the budget year so we can expense it, even if we have to pay for it in a future year. We still have that expenditure budgeted. And then staffing capacity, specifically in engineering, you know, looking at what we can handle, supplemented with contractors or some consultants, but also just what we can handle from a staff standpoint across the board for the capital plan. Pat mentioned we're going to do a little different. We're going to take it by department, so each of the departments will talk more specifically about what they have going on. Administration, Pat will take Village Hall specific, building and technology. Ryan will talk about technology on a village-wide basis, and then Chief Smith and Chief Kavanaugh, and then Heather and Nick will hit public works specific items that include infrastructure. So with that, I'll turn it over to Pat.
Sure. So here you'll see you've got this year's budget and then proposed for next year and then a couple years projected out, so 4 years projected out. So what we're focusing on is that bar between the two black lines. So you'll see the admin proposed capital for next year is just a little over 1.2 million. The big chunk of that is the Village Hall HVAC system replacement. So we've been talking about that for months now. That we said before, 32 years old, usually lasts about 20 years. Have been going as far as buying parts off of eBay, used parts to keep the system up and running. So the village board approved a contract with Amber Mechanical back in November to get that system replaced in June, hopefully. So some of the components are already on site. The area handling unit, which is kind of the lungs of the building, is supposed to be here in June. So we're hoping to get Amber in shortly after that and get them working on the replacement of the system. So that's $1 million of that 1.2. Also have a little bit of money in there, just I think $10,000 for other routine items that pop up at Village Hall, and then some money for the Mother Red House as well. So we're responsible for the upkeep of that. I think we're working right now to have some doors replaced over there and the burglar alarm system. So little things come up with regards to the Mother Red House. As far as technology, that 119 that 119 that's in there, that's some upgrades to the burglar alarm in this building. It's a placeholder to start exploring some paperless document management software that could be used across multiple departments. Right now, we're kind of siloed as far as our document management systems. So again, a placeholder for that. Some additional door improvements in this building. We've got some doors that are still operate with a key. They don't have electric strikes and the fob card, so you can keep track of who goes in and out of there. So we've got some of those doors we want to have outfitted. And then we carry some funding for audiovisual, both in the council chambers here and then conference room A. So there's some funds in for that. But like I said, the majority of it is the Village Hall HVAC. If you look at next year, so it shoots way up. That is, we put in $3 million as a placeholder for the Bittersweet Golf Course irrigation system replacement. So course was opened in '96. The irrigation system is getting to the end of life. Brad's out there constantly chasing leaks, can't get sprinkler heads anymore. He tries to buy them used. When he finds them, or if there's another course that replaces their irrigation systems, tries to pick those up. But a lot of man hours in maintaining that irrigation system out there. So last year we had a consultant take a look at it, give us a price on a turnkey system. It was just under $3 million. We're hoping to be able to get between 25% to 30% from the golf course. So we've set aside the amusement tax that's generated by the golf course specifically for improvements out there. And then also the golf course has had some really good years over the last 2 or 3 years. So depending on how that goes forward, I'm hoping to get some assistance from the golf course. So that would be in the golf fund, which isn't shown on here. So right now we've got this all in capital. So hopefully we would see that go down, like I said, by a percentage. So that's the big ticket item that shows in the next year and why that jumps up so much.
I think we're up. There we are. So on our slide here, we'll start off with llama replacement. So that's something that's not contemplated in the next fiscal year, but a good example of how we plan this out from the multi-year perspective, where we're keeping an eye on the vendor's ability to execute and how the technology is meeting our needs specifically. And so Llama is kind of one of our smaller vendors, so they kind of stay on our radar and we reevaluate and push that out as needed. So if we're still in a good spot when that comes up, we'll just kind of roll it forward and keep evaluating. But that's the approach that we take a lot on the technology side, is if we don't have a security drive or a business drive, we try and use the technology as long as we can. But what we do have in this budget otherwise is a recurring theme to stay ahead of our aging internal infrastructure and to be in a good position to address network security issues. Hardware, software, applications, and other network connected systems have to be manufacturer supported in this day and age in order to be patchable for security vulnerabilities. Without the ability to address security defects in whatever the connected systems are, it makes the whole environment vulnerable. So we have this theme kind of going from top to bottom. Starting right off on that is the network infrastructure itself. We see 5 to 10 years of service life in switching, routing, firewalls, and a good amount of our infrastructure is inside of that window. So in the next capital plan and the following 4 years, we have it laid out of what items get replaced in what departments. This year, we saw Wi-Fi and routing. We did the Wi-Fi update approval not so long ago at the village board. Routers are kind of ongoing. We have a lot of them. And next year, there'll be more routing and switching, but you will see those things. Firewalls are the same concept. We have units approaching end of life, and specifically there, we need updates to maintain the malware and threat detection inspection that happens when the packets go by. Much of our network is built with redundancy in mind, right? So we're not deploying these things in one-offs. So when we talk about switches and routers and these components, we're often talking about pairs of them. So that has a larger capital impact than if we were not building redundant networks. We do have funds allocated for security incident response services. We have prearranged agreements with third-party security vendors in case we do have some sort of security event. We really hope to not use those funds, but they're out there in capital just in case. Audio-visual updates. So we have a great proof of concept for updates in our training and meeting rooms that was deployed at the police department. That includes projector updates, audio enhancements, video distribution, auto-switching units. People come in, plug in their laptops. We've had requests from the other departments for this, and so we've got a good proof of concept, and we're building in the funds to build out those rooms that'll help us not only for meetings, but for training as well. Public Works has been working with a consultant on a SCADA master plan for updates to the water system. Heather can talk more about that, but what we've done is some planning ahead with funding so we can get ahead on some projects once the recommendations are final, but before we have another fiscal cycle. So at least we'll be able to pick off, or at least start planning some of the top improvements. We also have emergency response mobile routers. Our devices have been, we started deploying devices in emergency vehicles in 2016. The first generation of those devices are going end of life in about a year. So we've been doing replacements of those as vehicles get switched out, but we're kind of close to the end of that and looking to pick off the rest of them so we can meet that EOL. In there's virtualization improvements. So we just did virtualization servers, right? So there's storage components to that. We'll be adding some additional storage here at Village Hall and in our sort of DMZ or external services component that are contemplated. I think that that's the end of my list. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yes, Trustee Thorstensen.
A quick question.
Sure.
So where do you see prioritization of email upgrades?
So that we have in operating, and in the next fiscal year, we're looking at replacing our email security solution. We'll be changing vendors, and once that's done, the follow-on project is changing out the email system. That may be the following fiscal year. I'm still working out the details on timing on that. But we took the approach of if we didn't have the security solution in place, it would make the rest of the system change out a little bit more difficult.
Thanks.
Yep.
All right.
All right, good evening. Thank you. As far as the police department goes, Mr. Mutz has already kind of described the chart, but for fiscal year 25 projects, you'll see a big chunk of our capital expenditures are related to vehicles. And so there's a replacement of 6 squad cars. Those would be patrol vehicles, and that includes adding 3 to assist with the upstaffing or the staffing level of the police department. We will also be replacing an ET vehicle, which we do every year. and a K-9 vehicle. We're due to begin replacing the K-9 vehicles over the next 2 fiscal years. And then there's funding there for an unmarked vehicle, so for a total of 9 police vehicles. We do also have some money set aside through grant funding for K-9s. In the future, if we expand the K-9 program, or we find ourselves in a position where we have to replace a K-9 again, we do have some additional funding available on the vehicle side to add a K-9 vehicle for that expansion. As far as capital buildings this year, HVAC, again, our building is coming up on 24 years old. Most of the building is original, and so this is your customary replacement of a condenser on the roof. But that is something that we've stayed on top of with replacement of motors, et cetera, in the past. And so this is the next step there on replacing one of those 4 condensers. Gatekeeper, I know Ryan touched on this a little bit, as did Mr. Mutz, as far as that is our access control system over at the police department. We are coming up on end of life with the current system, and so we're budgeting to replace that system with a new model, if you will, and that is something that IS and Ryan and Chris would probably be in a better position to explain the details on. Portable generator integration. Again, this is a tertiary backup system to the police department. The portable generator has been ordered. Last year, engineering poured the slab over at the PD, and so it'll be stored at the police department, but it is movable and can be moved to different facilities throughout the village to provide generation and loss of electricity. Wellness room, we've talked about wellness, at least on the police department side, for a couple of years now. And we are in a position where we're hopeful to expand and add a rest and recovery wellness room inside the police department. So that would be converting one of our conference rooms to a wellness room and the associated costs related to that. Beyond fiscal year 2025, I just want to touch on that because I mentioned the building is 24 years old now, and with that comes needed improvements and upgrades to keep the building in working order and keep it looking nice. And so in the future, we have projections for carpet replacement, improvements to the community room, evidence lockers, inventory control system replacement. The evidence lockers downstairs are all original to the building and manual, and they are beginning to fail. And so we have a proposal in place for, I believe it's starting next year, in the current fiscal year 25 and then beyond, to begin replacing that system. In the next 2 years or so, we're going to have to address the training range downstairs, commonly referred to as the shooting range, but we use it for all sorts of things. And that system is the system that we currently have. The programming is beyond end of life. We are still operating under an old system. Windows system is offline, but the equipment itself is in need of replacement, carriers, etc. And those parts are not able to be purchased anymore. So we do have a small stockpile of parts. We have staff that are trained in replacing that, but it is something that we're going to need to replace in the near future, and we'll probably take that opportunity to upgrade that into some virtual reality type training in the same location. Concrete floorings downstairs, lighting, roofing, and UPS replacement are also projections for the next 5 years. Finally, policing in the 21st century. Just want to touch base on that because there are really 6 pillars of policing in the 21st century that were identified out of the President's task force. And a lot of these you have seen or are familiar with because we included those in the strategic planning. But there are going to be costs associated with each one of those pillars. We are active in policing. We've adopted all of the pillars already. Just as a refresher, trust and legitimacy is pillar number 1, policy and oversight is number 2, technology is number 3, community policing and crime reduction is number 4, and officer training and education is number 5. The last one we've expanded on a little bit. It was originally titled Officer Safety. We've now included retention, recruitment, and wellness to that pillar. And so the cost associated with each one of those is something that we'll project in the capital plan for the next 5 years. With that being said, are there any questions?
Any questions to my right? Questions to my left? Good. Oh, yes, Trustee Ross.
With the new squad cars, does that replace the ones that were in accidents that couldn't
No, that's a good question. As mentioned, the supply chain, the ability to purchase vehicles is a struggle we're all dealing with. There's a lot of factors involved with that. This is in addition to the replacement of the squad car that was totaled. The squad car that was damaged, the K-9 squad that was damaged, we have received back. It has been fixed, but that squad car is to be replaced in the next fiscal year. It was due to be replaced in the next fiscal year. The one that has been totaled, we are still in the process with insurance, working on a replacement. But the fleet administrator has looked long and far to try to find a vehicle to replace that. We've been unable to find one as of yet, and so we're still working on it.
Oh, thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. As far as the fire department goes, I'll start with our vehicles and equipment. I was just before you within the last month, laying out the entire vehicle plan we had. Ambulance 1342 that's noted on here, this is the ambulance that you actually approved already for us to purchase. Back to exactly what Chief Smith was saying, supply chain issues, ambulances are over 2 years out. So if we do not order them now, we're not going to see them. We actually, and this goes to what Brian Gosnell was telling us earlier, we have an engine that was ordered 2.5 years ago that we believe will go under production at the end of January here. We should see it in April. The nice part about that one, that was something we prepaid back at 3 years ago cost, so it really comes in at a good cost number compared to what today would be to order. But we are waiting for that one in April. And then as a reminder, we do have another ambulance already ordered above 1342 we're expecting to see next September. So that'll keep us going. 2 of our ambulances will go over 200,000 miles this year. Most departments out there have never heard of 150,000 miles. We've, over the years, been about 140, 150 on our replacements. But we will have 2 going over the 200,000 mile mark right now. Our maintenance, heavy internal maintenance and PM people has made that possible. But at the same time, it is definitely, we're wearing them thin. But it's a supply chain issue. It's not because anything we're not doing. We're placing orders with your support as early as we can. 2 other vehicles. We have 2 fire prevention vehicles. These are smaller front-wheel drive vehicles we'll replace. Both of them are over 10 years old. They're 2014s. Both these vehicles, due to space and how our stations are, do spend their winters, their entire year outside. Getting 10 years out of them, we've done well. They are definitely on the lower end for costs that we do on these, but we'll be replacing both those this year. And then the other equipment purchase this year, we're looking at replacing our thermal imaging cameras. We're able to replace all 14 of them for right around $76,000, and that's including chargers. The reason I point that cost out, when we started this program with thermal imaging cameras, we paid $26,000 for 1 camera. And now we're able to start getting the entire 14 replaced for 76. So it's really, technology's come up. In all of our cameras that we currently have that we've been using are end of life. When we're trying to get parts, it's more expensive to try to get them fixed than it is to replace them with the new cost. The technology's gotten so much better. It's kind of like the camera on your iPhone, how much clearer and better it's got. That's passed along in the thermal imaging world as well. So as far as buildings, we have a fairly large number in here. Most of this is what if money. One of the things we do know, the fire station 1 will start there. 43 years, going to be 44 years old. The rooftop units, we were able to replace 2 of them this year as part of the Station 1 project. We still have 5 more that are on the roof that are in need of replacement at some point. We're trying to stagger those. We could have to replace them all, but we're trying to do 2 a year, so we're building that like everything else we've done over time, so we're not replacing them all in the future on the same year. so we're hoping maybe replace 1 or 2 of those units this year. Station 2, which is now, that was opened up in 95, so we're 23 years old on there, or something like that. That unit, the heating, air conditioning are touch and go. We're doing lots of repairs. The nice part is those are residential size units, so replacing those is not all that bad compared to the, the rooftop commercial units. And Station 2, we really have a large project with the sprinkler system out there, up in the attic, the dry system. Very similar to what happened to our police department a few years ago, when they're kind of still dealing with it a little bit. We have the same thing going in Station 2. Once again, part of Station 2, and you'll see it in the future projects, one of the big ones, Station 1 is Station 3, we've been able to do the individualized bunks. Part of the health and wellness is trying to get the people that aren't on the call a little better night's sleep with the hours they are sleeping. And so we've really done well with the individual bunks. Station 2 still has an open air concept. It's got 3/4 walls. So especially during when COVID came through and we were trying to isolate people, that doesn't allow us to do it at Station 2. So part of the money we have this year is to get drawings done and a plan, and to even refresh the front administrative offices as part of that plan. So that's where some of these dollars are, with the plan in the future to possibly try to get Station 2's bunks up to, modern day. The other 2 ambulance that we want to replace in FY26, in engine FY27, those are in our capital plan for vehicle replacements. The reason I really want to mention them tonight, both those will probably come before you this budget year to be able to replace in those years. Ambulance are still remaining over 24 to 28 months out to order. Engines are closer to 3 years now out timeline. So you're probably going to see both these. We have to start the specs, get everything organized, everything to get these out and figure out what the cost of these is going to be. So these may be in front of you and are part of our future replacement. I know Brian's done a great job of keeping our money all lined up for us and everything as we continue to go out, especially the outfitting of these vehicles once we get them in the house. But it's quite the challenge. So, any questions?
Yes, Trustee Thorstensen.
So the FY26, that's the 200K mile ambulances? The ambulances beyond FY 2025, ambulances FY26?
Yeah, beyond, so FY26 we would order one more ambulance, and then FY27 we would order an engine. The FY25 one up there, we've already placed the order for. So this is the year, as I presented the program, we actually replace ambulances back-to-back years, then it's every other year going forward. But this is when we added the 6 ambulances, and they have a 10-year life expectancy, so this is the double year this year.
So these additional ones noted here
are beyond the one that I mentioned earlier that's an order we haven't seen. That's nowhere on the screen, nor is the engine that we have ordered anywhere on the screen. I just mentioned that that's how far behind we are right now.
And I'm just trying to clarify what you also mentioned early on, is you had 2 ambulances approaching over 200,000 miles each. So they're in the rotation for what you're speaking of here?
So one of them would be replaced by the one that we've already ordered, and the next one would be replaced by the other. One of them will be with us as the 6th reserve. We're trying to get to the point where we staff 5 all the time. The 6th one would be running when we're doing PMs and things like that. And that will be approaching 10 years old at that point when we could replace it.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
hopefully that makes sense. The other thing I didn't point out on up there is the tornado warning sirens. We continue, those are aging in place. We replaced some drivers in the last couple of years. This is money that we carry forward in case we ever have. We have an annual maintenance program. Third-party company comes out, inspects them, looks at them, actually maintains them, and this is dollars in case we have to replace any major components.
Trustee Ross.
You said with the engine that we paid for it ahead of time. So with the ambulances and those, when you say you're going to come before us and ask, are you going to try to pay for it ahead of time or wait until it's done and then pay for it?
The vendor's done away with that program at this point. The contracts that we're signing actually have a rider in there that they could add dollars for the chassis portion. The Ford chassis, they could actually come back and ask for additional money. They won't let you prepay and lock in costs anymore. It's just too fluid of a market right now. I wish we would do it. I know Brian and I have talked about it, and And we will try on the engine again. I don't foresee that happening, but we'll always ask that question. Do we agree with you?
Yes, trustee Baums.
And how much can we depend on from the Waukegan Warren Fire District as far as helping with these vehicles?
So we did, during the last contract negotiation, build in capital as part of their fees. So they're paying a portion of the capital. When you look at what they're paying us on a quarterly basis, capital replacement programs have been looked into. The same charts I used to show you our vehicle plan, when we built their costs, operating and capital were both taken into account. So they are paying at 30% rate.
Oh, okay.
Which is, very similar to their call volume, maybe a little higher, but very similar.
Okay.
They could always give us a free one though, right? Isn't that still an open, right?
They are a very good partner to us.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. Thank you, Chief.
No, I wasn't.
All right. So moving on to Public Works, Streets and Utility. This is one of the first years I'm coming before you and not asking for a 10-yard or a 5-yard, so that's kind of exciting. So instead, we're transitioning to more of our smaller vehicles, but since they're cheaper, I'm asking for more of them. So that's 0, I guess. So 3 1-tons is what we're proposing for next year. These are pretty versatile trucks. We're also looking at the possibility of outfitting them with wings and plows so that potentially we could move toward that route, maybe getting them sooner, but a lot of communities are thinking that, so it might not pan out for us. But similarly, we can't buy things early. We can't place orders early. We've tried to do all of that, and the entity in Iowa won't sell to us next year because they're getting fewer and they want to keep it to their local state only. So the challenges continue. Additionally, we have some money included for the bucket truck. So similar to what Chief was saying, we budgeted for it this year, we're ordering it this year, but when we actually get it, it'll probably cost more money. So we're associating some funds for that in next fiscal year to help offset that additional cost. In addition, we've put in a brush cutter and a stump attachment. So this will help when it comes to stump grinding in front of people's properties when we cut down a tree, to try and make that when we cut it to when we grind it, same day, as opposed to we cut it and then we have a contractor come back a couple weeks later and grind it down. So that'll improve response time for residents, and hopefully that'll make them feel like they're getting that white glove service that we try to accomplish from Public Works. Also this year we have 2 skid steers that are up for replacement. So those are both, I believe, 2013 models, so we're hitting the 10-year mark on those. When it comes to building improvements, we're bidding out the flat roof and the roof for the truck floor this year. So later on in the meeting, you'll see that bid date request before you. But like with most things and the weather, I can't guarantee it'll be done by April 30, so I'm putting some money in for next year to cover anything that happens between May 1 and May 30. In addition to that, we have more exterior door replacements. I've been replacing a few at a time, so that'll continue. Same thing with different garage door items. Fuel island, though, is one of our bigger one that's coming. So everyone uses the fuel island. It's reached 30 years, the tank's underground, so we need to look at replacing those. The insurance companies' rates have gone up because they're end of life, and so we have to design and see what we're gonna do to replace it. So this year's just design, and then we'll figure out budgeting next year for either reconstruction or just doing tanks or redoing the whole thing. We're not really sure yet what they're gonna recommend. Ongoing HVAC replacements, similar to everyone else with 20+ year buildings, and SCADA improvements at buildings. So that could be, something like at one of our lift stations changing something, not programming and technology because that's listed later, but actual physical changes to structures and buildings. And then in the world of technology, so same thing, camera system upgrades, some AV improvements in our training room. We eat in our lunchroom and we train in our lunchroom. And we got a couple of TVs and a projector and a giant switching station, so we're looking to kind of streamline that, make it a little bit easier for people to just plug in and present when they come to Public Works. I think that about touches all of it. Any questions on this before I go to beyond 2025? Okay. So then I guess for the next slide. So the things that we'll need to plan for, obviously the construction of the fuel island will be the big deal. And it's not just the payment to build it, but how are we going to allow for everyone to still get fuel? Like we don't really have a lot of major options nearby. So Is it going to other communities? Is it, you know, partnering with a gas station in town? Is it going to Lake County? Is it going to Mundelein? Who are we gonna get help from in order to help, you know, fuel vehicles when people need it? So we'll have to strategize about that. In addition, the material bins that I was unable to procure this current fiscal year will be in a future year once we figure out a more economical or the best way to do that. Like I mentioned, the use of 1 tons going forward, maybe having wing plows attached to them, maybe not. And then south building and main building, just in general utilization of space. We have a lot of different shops around the truck floor that have garage doors, but they're 8 foot wide. I can't fit a plow truck through an 8 foot wide overhead door. And if I could, I'll pull forward and there'll be a post right in the way holding up the mezzanine. So it doesn't make a lot of sense from a space perspective. So I'm talking to architects to see kind of what we can do to help make those spaces more efficient. In addition, there'll be more SCADA optimization. Essentially what's gonna come from that report is if you were given this water system today and it was brand new, how would you run it? What stations would you have? What controls would you suggest? And so that's what we're gonna move forward. And I know Ryan touched on it, and we will continue to touch on it because it's one of those things you have to invest in and keep it working so that it works for you. And lastly, generator installs will continue at all of our standalone stations, just being ready in case power goes out anywhere.
Questions? No?
Any questions?
Trustee O'Brien?
I just read that a new concern, at least maybe in Illinois, is water systems and maybe even the safety behind them. Is that something that's being built into this then?
Technology side of things and the physical security side of things. So yeah, it's a requirement, and we've already met that. We have it on file with the state.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Next up is overview of next year's capital plan for our infrastructure. First up is our streets program. That will be roughly 6.1 miles of resurfacing. In years past 2 years, we've been doing a recon job as well. This year, we're gonna hold off on the recon just because there's no immediate need for reconstruction for this particular year. If budget allows, we may be able to add on another $500,000 worth of roads. Just depends what Brian says. So that might be able to get bumped up to 6.5 miles, 6.6 miles, which is great from a perspective of reaching a level of service of 20 years for every street. It's roughly 6 miles per year to keep that level of service of 20-year lifespan. Next up is the sidewalk program. We'll be in Zone 5, which is the east side of town, and then additionally we'll be doing some sidewalk repairs at the police department around their facility. And then the sidewalk project, which will be associated with the MFT resurfacing project, will be on Florida Avenue. Currently, Florida does not have any sidewalk along the road. Boulevard View bike trail discharges into Florida, and so I know there has been some resident concerns about providing safe access for some pedestrians and people that ride bikes. So we will be installing a sidewalk on the south side from Boulevard View Trail to Belle Plaine to provide some pedestrian access, hopefully improving the safety of that road as well. And then bridge maintenance, there's some minor maintenance over at the Leonard Drive Covered Bridge. There's some erosion issues happening, and we'd like to have some preventive maintenance where we take care of the erosion before it gets too big of an issue. We'll be doing a street lighting program in which we'll be replacing some direct bury wires. The direct bury wires have been there for 20 plus years. They're becoming frayed and reaching end of life. So Public Works will be implementing a project where we will be installing conduit to put wire in to help protect the street light wiring and help with future maintenance. That will be occurring along Allen Road, Tri-State Parkway, from Norman to Cemetery, and then along Dilly's Road as well, from Pinewood to Route 132. So pretty much right along the Overweiss Golden Corral corridor. Moving on to stormwater management, we'll be allocating $325,000 for various drainage projects throughout town to see if we can improve some local drainage issues, as well as investigate ways to improve the Gurney Industrial Detention Basin, which is in the industrial area along Grove Avenue. This is one of the few detention basins the village owns, to see if we can help with some maintenance issues over there with cattails obstructing some culverts. So we're going to see what we can do about getting those cattails maintained such that we don't have problems every other year with drainage over off that detention pond. And then additionally budget some money for our land acquisition projects. I know there's Lake County SMC is interested in one more property along Kilburn Road. I know that's been something we've been looking at for the past couple months now, and we'll see if we can get that on the schedule for this upcoming summer. Water and sewer, the village will be doing a cost share intergovernmental agreement with Lake County and IDOT. There are 2 intersections that are currently going to be worked on, hopefully next summer. We'll see if they get bid out. But that's Star School and 41, and then Washington Home Club. Both those projects will require us to relocate the water main, and so they're doing that on our behalf, and we are allocating some funds to take care of that. And then the village's capital project will be along Route 21 north of Grand Avenue to Prairie Oak Drive, which is a little under a half mile of water main replacement. And then the village will be reviewing the skate optimization report from Baxter Women that was performed last year, and then begin implementing some recommendations to improve the water system as a whole. And then moving on to some of the maps. I'm not sure if you have this map in front of you. This is just an overall with Zone 1 kind of zoomed in there. That will be the Westgate, Pembroke area, and then Spruce Street, Cedar Road, or Cedar Avenue, and then Darlene Court and South Road. That'll be Zone 1. Zone 2 will include the east side of town. Did I go too far on my map? I'm sorry. East side of town. So that's Pacific, Atlantic, 2 little segment in the northeast corridor, and then Meadowcrest, and then Drexel, University Avenue, and Ferndale Street, the little subdivision that's kind of a dead end. So it'll be nice to get in there, get those roads resurfaced in Zone 2. And then moving on to Zone 3, that will include Knowles Road all by itself out west, and then South Ridge and Heather Ridge, and then a Noble Road in Heather Ridge will be Leonard Drive. That will be from Farewell Court to Heather Ridge Drive. In total, there'll be 38 roads at 6.1 miles. The average PCI for all 38 roads is roughly 3.5, excuse me, not 3.5, that would be 34.5 PCI rating out of 100. So 100 being a really good road, 0 being a really bad road, so we're in the 30 range. So these roads are time for resurfacing. And then last but not least, the water main, as mentioned, is Route 21. Majority of the work will occur on the west side of 21, from Grand Avenue to Prairie Oak Drive, or Road, a little under a half mile. The existing water main is cast iron. It has an extensive break history, and usually for this particular run, it ends up being a complicated fix where sometimes we have to hire Campanella and Sons to correct some of the water main breaks just due to the difficulty of the location of the existing main. So this was a high priority water main to be replaced for this upcoming fiscal year. And with that, I will turn it back over to Brian. Oh, sorry, are there any questions?
That's true. To my right, to my left. You were correct, Nick. You can hand it over.
All right, thank you, Nick. Moving on to the forecast side of this. Along with the capital plan, we go through a financial forecasting exercise. One, make sure we can fund the capital plan, and then two, make sure we can sustain operations moving forward and tell what the capital plan impact on the fund balance is. So that's the primary reasons for the forecast. We also look at major revenues, again, in those three different models, look at water and sewer rates, and then take a deep dive into major expenditures, and then with some other assumptions, put all that together and really see, I guess, validate that we can sustain operations for 5 years moving forward. We look at 6 different funds, actually 7 different funds if you count water and sewer as 2. But primarily tonight we're going to focus on general fund, the capital fund, and the 2 water and sewer funds. So I just wanted to walk through a little exercise here that shows expenditures, revenues, and then the impact on fund balance. Right in the middle of this chart is the estimated year end for this fiscal year. So future 5 years to the right, actual 5 years prior to the left. This is expenditures. So this is for the general fund, forecasted expenditures, those major expenditures that I talked about that we go into detail, and then some general assumptions for everything else. If we then add revenues on top of that chart, you can see major revenues are the green portion of the bar, and everything else is the yellow portion of that bar. So again, we talked about doing major revenues in 3 different models. I'm showing you the baseline here, which is like historical average, versus a contraction or an expansion model, which is like more like what if something happens, or what if new tax revenue comes on. So really just focusing on the baseline here. So those are the revenues. As you can see off to the right, expenditures exceed revenues. That is, I don't want to say normal, but almost normal for any forecast structure that you put together. There is plenty of opportunity within there to focus on things to be able to, I'll show you the next slide. This is the fund balance, but to be able to bend that curve, and that's primarily new development, some of the things Ellen works on. New development, growing the tax base, being efficient in operations, and there is almost always opportunities for that. So when you see it exceeding revenues, and in this case, the dashed lines are our fund balance policy. So the upper line's at 65%, the lower line's at 60%. You can see we're still within our policy all the way out through the end of the forecast period, which is a good sign. There will be, like I said, opportunities to be able to bend that cost curve up. So really, when we look at this forecast, the red line is our ending fund balance with the 3 scenarios. But when you look at this forecast, really nothing to be concerned about. Looks totally normal. There's going to be opportunities to be able to bend that cost curve up. No red flags are going off here when we look at the general fund. Go through the same charts for the for the capital improvement fund. So this is non-water and sewer capital and infrastructure. Again, fiscal year end 24 right in the middle here, future to the right. Expenditures. In here we include off to the right is the 5-year capital plan expenditures. Add in here home rule sales tax, which is one of the primary funding sources. That's the green section of the bar, and then kind of everything else in the yellow. One thing that is included in the yellow, and that is extremely critical to funding our capital and infrastructure plan, is $1.5 million annual general fund capital contribution. This is fund balance over and above that 65% mark that we use for capital. I'll show you a slide later on what happens if we don't use that, but it's vital. Also, we talked about at the second quarter report what that balance is for next year, the $3 million, and using $1.5 million for regular capital, and then $1.5 million for water and sewer. So that's contemplated in this plan. That formal action will happen later on in the process, but we did include it in this plan. No formal fund balance policy here, so you see the fund balance target, which is just 25% of home rule sales tax, puts us right at that $1 million mark. That's the dashed line, and then the actual ending fund balance is the red line. You can see in the out years, we dip just below it. Again, there are plenty of opportunity to make up that small gap, so that's not concerning at all. To fully fund what we talk about as the capital plan, like Nick was talking about, the 6 miles and everything else, we need about $2 million. And so that's $2 million, I should say, capital contribution from the general fund to fully meet those needs. We're at $1.5 million. There's opportunities to make up that other $500,000. But long-term, we want to try to get to that $2 million mark. Historically, we've averaged right in that $1.5 million to $2 million range in, again, general fund money, general fund balance above the policy that we can use for this contribution. This is what it looks like if we don't have that contribution. So you can see it just doesn't work. So the point of this slide is we need to be conscious of utilizing that excess fund balance, I guess you could call it, for capital. Otherwise, our capital funds and infrastructure replacement plan just isn't sustainable. Move on to the water side. Again, same concept here. Estimated year end for fiscal year 24, right in the middle. Future off to the right again. This is capital plan. The green is water rates. The yellow is everything else. You'll see in fiscal year 24, that middle bar, the yellow is a little bit bigger. This year and last year it was. That's because of the contribution from that excess fund balance in the general fund, that capital contribution. Still proposing the $1.5 million. Also included in the forecast is a rate assumption of a 6% increase annually. That gets this fund to self-sustaining essentially. So it's not reliant on that contribution from the general fund that in turn takes away from, I guess, the above ground infrastructure, roads and things like that. So now all that can be used for the 131 fund, roads, that infrastructure versus water fund, which will be self-sustaining the capital program with the rate adjustments. Now, again, that 6% increase is annual. If you recall, we didn't raise it for a couple years during the pandemic, and then we had a small increase last year. I think it was just over 3%. So we had a little bit of catch up to do. And you can see with that 6%, again, we don't have a formal policy for fund balance in the water fund, but we target 35% of operating expenditures. See, with that 6%, we hover right around that mark. So self-sustaining, no general fund contribution here in the out years. We can use that for roads. 6% gets us there. So if we look at what 6% looks like to a customer for just an average bi-monthly bill of 10,000 gallons, so 5,000 gallons a month usage, this is what we look like with the Jawa communities. The yellow bar is what we are now. The green bar is what will be proposed with the 6%. We still be the lowest with the exception of Volo. Volo is unique in that they levy property taxes to offset the cost of some of the cost of their water system. So we're still down on that low end. And I would note that at least, just looking at the chart, I'd say 3/4 of those communities, at least that I know off the top of my head, had increases during the pandemic and things like that, where we didn't. So we also know that Jawa is working on their 5-year plan. I think they adopted it, right, Pat? Adopted the 5-year plan?
They'll adopt with the budget.
With the budget. Yeah. That calls for 5% increases annually on that portion of our rate, which is about a third of our rate. So that allows us the 6% increase, again, only looking at next year right now, but to smooth that out, 6% annually is what it would be, allows us to have a self-sustaining fund and capital, continue with the senior discount, and then again, smooth that rate increase out so it's not bouncing all over the place in the out years. We still need to get through the operating portion of the water and sewer fund, so while we're 6% right now is what that number is. Could change when we get through operating. We'll know more about year ends at that point, so we'll know more about any surplus that would be in the water fund that could bring that down. But right now, that's where that figure's at. Questions on that before I summarize here?
Mayor?
Yes, Trustee O'Brien.
I jumped the rails just a tad when you were talking about the Jawa increase and our increase. Does that mean 11% total, or does that mean 5 + 1?
No, that means a third of our rate will increase 5% regardless of what we do.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a combined rate, so it's one rate total.
Okay.
I have a question.
Oh, sorry. Oh, go ahead, Brian.
So, just summarize here, we're able to right now fund the fiscal year 25 proposed capital plan without debt, meet the fund balance policies or targets in those funds, that we don't have formal policies. We talked about the importance of that capital contribution and how we use that, the importance of water rate adjustments. And so from this point on, the direction that staff would be looking for, and again, we don't need anything till we hit that March workshop, and then all this will be formalized when we hit the budget approval. Just any feedback on the capital plan, any feedback on the water rate adjustment that we'll continue to hone in on when we go through capital budgets. And then again, using that fiscal year 23 excess general fund balance, $1.5 million capital, $1.5 million water and sewer that we will transfer at the end of this fiscal year for use next year. So that's just direction, future decisions to be made, any feedback on those items. Where we're at in the budget process, check marks are done. Tonight we did the capital plan presentation. Operating budgets are actually due tomorrow. So we move right into the operating side after capital's done. And then we'll set up those meetings with the departments and then one-on-ones with the village board after we get a draft document put together and out. All that in preparation for that first budget workshop. We'll go over all the operating stuff and a lot of the items in here again, just to reiterate where we're at and if anything changed. That'll be that first meeting in March. So with that, any questions?
Yeah, so just a lot of information tonight. Everyone's got the proposed capital plan. We'll get you a copy of the PowerPoint if you want that to take a look at. Again, if something pops up or you have any questions, reach out to Brian and I. Again, it's the budget process is a marathon, not a sprint. So we're just, from the board perspective, kind of at the beginning here. So,
Thanks. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion by trustee Ross, second by trustee Garner. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned for